Hey, thanks for taking time out of your busy day to check out this quick informational video. My name is Rob Kaufman and I'm one of the commissioners here in Lincoln County. I would like to take this opportunity to pass along some information, hopefully to help you, the taxpayers, better understand why the county is facing a financial hardship, how it relates to public safety, how it will affect you, and a way to possibly help the situation. So why is there a problem? In short, Initiative 747. Its effects are becoming progressively worse and have created a structural gap for all Washington state taxing entities. Property taxes are skyrocketing in Washington. We need to defuse the property tax time bomb. Those were the rally cries of Tim Eyman, author of Initiative 747, which passed voter approval back in 2001. I-747 was designed to limit property tax increases to 1% more tax collected than in the previous year. This sounds great, right? Government has gotten out of control. They're wasting all of our tax money. This certainly may have been the case in many instances, especially at the federal and state government levels. But for the most part, local governments seem to operate quite efficiently. The smaller the government, the more that holds true. But when people are frustrated because they don't like how their tax dollars are spent, some tend not to differentiate between federal, state, and local governments. It's just the government. I believe that was the rationale behind the passage of I-747. At the time, people were tired of the government growing unchecked and wasting their tax dollars. Well, I-747 must have been a good solution, right? Because here we are 14 years later and state and local governments are still open for business. Local governments have continued to make cuts and use reserves to balance their budgets, all the while struggling to provide adequate essential services such as public safety and public health. It's easy to blame local government when you write out your property tax payment, even though the lion's share of it goes to the state government and the schools. In this example, the state and schools get almost $55, while the county general fund receives just $11, or 10% of the $101 total tax bill. What I-747 has done is it has essentially created a structural gap. The word structural is used to indicate a crisis that is a long-term problem caused by the structure of general fund revenues and expenditures. It is not a short-term problem caused by the downturn in the economy. The structural gap is very simply explained in that general fund revenues grow at a slower rate than expenditures. General fund revenues grow at about 1% annually, while expenditures grow at 3 to 5%. As you can see, this gap dramatically increases over time as the cost of maintaining services grows faster than revenues. But revenues must keep up with expenses in order to continue to provide the same level of service. If they don't, there has to be continuous cuts in the level of essential services to the citizens. So what can be done about the structural gap? Well, in the short term, make difficult budget decisions that involve laying off employees and reducing the level of services. In the long term, the situation can only be resolved by the legislature with collaboration of all involved. There are several ways that voters have the ability to approve new taxes to continue to receive the same level of service. However, these are still not long-term fixes to the structural problem. There's a lot of money in other funds. Why aren't you using that money? Well, those funds are restricted use funds and can only be used for a specific purpose as dictated by state law. A few examples of dedicated or restricted funds are the County Road Fund, the Capital Improvement Fund, the Law Library Fund, Public Health, and Emergency Communications. Speaking of the County Road Fund, I frequently hear, you're short on funds, you're laying people off, yet you can build a new county shop? Well, this is a perfect example of a dedicated fund. That fund can only be used for legitimate road purposes. Not only that, but the majority of revenue for the County Road Fund comes from fuel tax, not property tax. Even though the 1% limitation does apply, county road funds in the state of Washington are not nearly as adversely impacted as the general funds. There's more flexibility in the general fund, which is a relatively small portion of the total budget. This fund pays for traditional functions of county government, such as the sheriff's office, and all of the critical day-to-day services that the courthouse provides that are not supported by dedicated revenues. Almost 3/4 of the general fund goes to support state-mandated criminal justice and public safety services. But what does public safety entail? Well, it's the sheriff's office, jail, dispatch in E911, the prosecuting attorney, public defense, district and superior court, the county clerk, juvenile services, and probation. So what about cutting expenses and tightening your belt? Well, Lincoln County has done virtually everything possible to eliminate waste, improve efficiencies, and do more with less. In fact, the efficiencies have been so great since the implementation of I-747 that the public has virtually felt no impact up until this point. This is because small counties are masters of doing more with less. But the problem with limiting revenue growth to 1% is that it is not tied to inflation and it is not sustainable in an economic climate where the cost of goods and services continue to rise at a faster rate. But make no mistake, it's not just about small counties. The effect is just more pronounced in smaller counties. They are especially hit hard because of the smaller amount of levy dollars collected, the smaller the yearly increase is. Say 1% of $2 million in Lincoln County is a whole lot less money than 1% of, say, $48 million in Spokane County. For the general fund in counties, the number one source of revenue is property tax. The amount budgeted for collection in Lincoln County for all services except the county road fund for 2016 is about $2 million. For next year in 2017, that 1% will bring in a whopping extra $20,000. The cost to provide services mandated by the state constitution, state laws, and state rules rise at 3 to 5% a year, yet property taxes can only increase 1%. This compounds itself, making the problem exponentially worse with each passing year. Basically, no matter how efficient local government is, if its revenue is restricted from keeping pace with the economy and expenses, eventually its ability to provide essential public services becomes jeopardized, and the gap just keeps getting wider. So what's left to cut? Well, the only expenses left to cut in the future are employees. Every office in the courthouse is now at below minimum staffing levels. The sheriff's office is short 3 deputies over the last 2 years, and there's no money available to replace them. With drug use related property crimes occurring all too often, it is imperative that there are sufficient deputies available to respond when the need arises. In 2015, I-747 resulted in an almost $1 million loss to total county government. The statutory limit that any county can levy for its general fund is $1.80 per $1,000 of assessed value. However, because of the 1% limitation, the $1.80 has been unreachable since 2002. The $1.80 has declined steadily since then and is currently at $1.38 for 2016, which is an effective loss of revenue to the general fund of $580,000 just this year. Since 2008, the total loss has been almost $3 million, with most of that being lost in just the last 4 years. Our original levy system was designed to keep pace with the economy. As the assessed value of the counties increased, so would the revenue. But thanks to I-747, as the assessed values of the counties increase, which they do every year, the levy rate must go down in order to maintain that 1% increase. As you can see, this is a steady, rapid decline in revenue that becomes exponentially worse every year. Couple that loss in revenue with a steady increase in cost with no apparent end in sight, well, you get the picture. Just to be clear, not all counties feel the full effect of the 1% limitation. Some counties are able to mitigate the loss with an increase in sales tax revenue and new construction. Typically, bigger counties are able to maintain parks and even golf courses. Well, that would be nice, but smaller counties are just trying to provide basic, essential public services. I think that's why the legislature doesn't seem real interested in fixing the problem. It just doesn't affect all 39 counties. Us little guys are stuck trying to figure it out and fending for ourselves. So what can we do about this? Well, RCW 8214-450 authorizes a county legislative authority to submit a proposition to the voters and, if approved, impose a sales and use tax of up to 0.3% for public safety. Even though the statute mandates that only 1/3 of all monies received shall be used solely for public safety purposes, Lincoln County will dedicate 100% of the revenue toward that purpose, such as replacing lost revenue for funding a deputy sheriff. Does the legislature know about this problem? Absolutely they do. In fact, it's even mentioned in the intent and findings section of the RCW that allows a sales tax proposition. The legislature finds that local governments in the state of Washington face enormous challenges in the area of criminal justice and public health. It is the intent of the legislature to allow local governments to raise revenues in order to better protect the health and safety of Washington state and its residents. I find these words written into our state law to be incredible. The legislature so generously gives us the power to raise taxes to provide for things that they mandate. How conveniently they forget that counties carry out public safety and criminal justice duties on behalf of the state, and the state has historically provided adequate funding. The shared revenue from various state sources do provide funding to help pay for such things as criminal justice and indigent defense, but it's not nearly enough. As the state struggles to balance their budget, these revenue streams dwindle, leaving counties struggling with unfunded and partially funded mandates. When law enforcement arrests bad guys committing property crimes, they are enforcing the laws of the state, not the county. Those bad guys are then jailed, prosecuted, adjudicated, and ran through the entire system, all on behalf of the state. And typically, these individuals are indigent and cannot afford an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you, right? Well, guess who pays for this? This kind of activity occurs all too often, and it takes people and money to combat crime. So how expensive is a deputy? Well, as you can imagine, law enforcement services are extremely expensive, and there are a lot of more costs involved than just salaries. There are a myriad of related expenses such as firearms, bulletproof vests, training, radios, uniforms, and vehicles. The average yearly cost to the taxpayers for one road deputy is about $130,000, but the average salary is around $60,000. But these costs do not include administration, liability insurance, or dispatch services. If this were to pass, how can we be sure that the funds are spent appropriately? Again, Lincoln County is committed to using 100% of the revenue towards public safety, and we will establish a dedicated fund in order to receive the revenue. There will also be a reserve account inside of that fund to help offset unexpected expenditures. Again, all revenue received into this account will be used solely for the purposes that enhance the safety of the public. So where do my sales tax dollars go now? Well, as you can see, the state gets most of it, 6.5% to be exact. The local jurisdiction gets 1%, 1/10 of 1% is collected for criminal justice, 1/10 of 1% goes to emergency communications, for a total of 7.7. The amount of sales tax that the towns currently receive is split with the counties. Towns get 85% and the counties get 15%. So where would my sales tax dollars go? As you can see, the public safety tax would increase the rate to 8%. The towns would still collect their regular rate that is split with the county. Everything remains the same except for the new amount of 0.3% of the entire amount collected countywide the county receives 60% and the towns share 40% based on population. So how much is this going to cost me? Well, currently a $50 purchase costs you $3.85. That same purchase, if the new public safety sales tax is approved, will cost you $4, just an additional 15 cents. If you buy something that cost $1,000, you would pay an extra $3. Retail sales of vehicles are exempt from this proposed increase. Also keep in mind, if you are a licensed business and are purchasing items for the use in the general course of business, typically that sales tax you pay is deducted as an expense on your federal income tax return. Also last December, Congress passed the Consolidated Appropriations Act, which allows Washington residents who itemize their deductions to also deduct sales tax off of their income tax, even if they are not a business. So how much do we pay in the surrounding areas? Well, a lot of jurisdictions have already implemented the public safety sales tax. In fact, currently we have one of the lowest rates in the state. But when you go to Spokane or leave Lincoln County to buy things, you are actually helping fund public safety in those neighboring cities and counties. As you can see, Airway Heights and Spokane are at almost 9%, with Ephrata at 8%, East Wenatchee 8.2%, Omak at 8.1%, Grand Coulee is 7.9%, and Lincoln County we are currently at 7.7%. The next slide shows a chart with the estimates of what the towns would receive. 40% of the new revenue goes to the towns. The amount each town would get varies and is based on population. These figures are in addition to the sales tax currently received. Creston would get the least with around $6,000 per year, while Davenport would get the most at about $44,000. Elmira $7,000, Harrington $11,000, Odessa $24,000, Reardon $15,000, Sprague $12,000, and Wilbur at $23,000. 60% of the new revenue would go to the county, and Lincoln County would receive just a little over $200,000. So when will we get to vote on this? Since the towns in the county also receive benefit from this proposed public safety sales tax, the commissioners felt that it was imperative to have the support of all 8 towns in order to proceed. Since all 8 towns have, by resolution, unanimously supported the proposal, the proposition will be on the general election ballot in November. Nobody likes new taxes, but the reality is that costs continue to rise faster than revenue. And if we the people want the same level of service, there has to be revenue to pay for it. Folks, this is a very serious problem that you need to be aware of. And this public safety sales tax is a way to help, but only if you, the voters, agree. If not, we will continue to make do with what we have, just like everyone else. Government's only power comes from the consent of the people, and governments are established to protect and maintain individual rights. And now you get to decide at what level those rights will be protected and maintained. It is the duty of local elected officials to keep you informed of financial struggles and to prevent solutions. Here is a problem and here is a way to help. You decide. Again, my name is Rob Kaufman, and I appreciate you watching this video, and please feel free to contact me with any questions. I would be happy to visit with you anytime. Thank you.